Ooh. Oh, so I think we are live now. I think we are. Got the little red button, so I think that means that we're live. So if everyone can hear me, welcome to the Blueprint for the Future panel with Youth Music. Youth Music are a national charity. They invest in music making projects that support children and young people aged up to 25 and help them to develop personally and socially as well as musically. In the panel, we'll be discussing the Blueprint for the Future, which is a report that explores through the voices of young people how current routes for them to move from education to employment are not fit for purpose, and sets out a positive vision for change that's centered on the power of supporting and cultivating young creatives across the music industry, which is why we have a selection of young creatives with us today. So first, I'd like to ask everyone to introduce themselves, if that's okay. So starting with Louise.
Hi, my name's Louise. I work for Youth Music, who, like you said, are a funding body, and we support music making projects for young people. And my role is to manage our portfolio of projects up in the North East and in Yorkshire as well.
Sick. George?
I'm George. I've done some freelance work with Youth Music, and I also play in a band based in Newcastle.
Oh, Shante?
Hi, I'm a singer-songwriter and I'm currently working with Launchpad and Come Play With Me.
Leonie?
Hi, I'm Leonie. I am the singer of my band Leo, and I also work freelance at an organisation in Doncaster called Higher Rhythm on a youth music project, actually.
Fabulous. And finally, Bailey.
Hi, folks. My name's Bailey. What do? I run a radio station that I co-founded with someone called Aura, called Sable Radio in Leeds, and do kind of like lots of sound engineering, film, kind of art direction, programming stuff on the side.
So everyone's kind of got an involvement in youth music. And yeah, so I am Lily Fontaine. I am in the Leeds band English Teacher. I play guitar and sing in that, and I'm also in a band called Eads, and I am a music writer and I write for youth music sometimes, which is really nice. So that's all of us. So a little bit now about the convention. So the Yorkshire Music Forum convention is produced by Yorkshire Music Forum Consortium, which is Come Play With Me, DMF Digital, High Rhythm, Arnold Brown Limited and Music Leeds, and it's in collaboration with Launchpad. Yorkshire Music Forum is a PRS Foundation talent development partner, and the event is supported by the BPI as well as Youth Music, which is awesome, with public funding from the National Lottery through Arts Council England, Leeds 2023, Arts Leeds, and Leeds City Council with Launchpad. Before we start, I think it's really important everyone knows that you can find out about all the other talks happening as part of this year's convention through the links that are going to be in the comments. Definitely check them out, because I watched the ones that were earlier in the programming and they were really good. And also closed captioning is available if you watch through the Launchpad Facebook page. And also we're gonna have like 50 minutes at the end for questions. So if you have any questions, please just drop them in the comments, and then we'll try our best to like answer as many as possible. So there's a lot to cover with the report, isn't there? So should we get on with some questions? The first one that we've got prepped. So there's a quote from the report that says that there's a lack of information available in schools and the HE system about how big the UK music industry is and the diversity of job roles within it. And I just wanted to ask if we remember learning about the wider music industry roles when we were younger, or if that's something that we've had to sort of discover as we've grown up. So should we start with Bailey?
Unmute myself, probably best. Yeah, did I hear about? No, not really. I never kind of had an exposure to a lot of the different kind of careers possible. Right through till uni, I studied politics, and like obviously anyone that's been to uni, I'm sure there's similar things in college, but like job fairs and stuff, it's like law firms, solicitors, the RAF, and like very little in the way of like creative things. So yeah, in a nutshell, didn't really have much exposure to.
George?
Yeah, I mean, I remember when I was in school and sometimes musicians would come in and you would learn a lot about the performance side. And I think that's one of the issues with the curriculum as well, is that curriculum is entirely performance based. And what you get is people who are passionate about the industry, want to, develop a career in it, but they haven't learned about PRs, the roles of record labels, anything like that. So I think that's a massive issue on the curriculum side of things too.
Yeah, definitely. That's something that I definitely feel like, and it was in the report as well, is like a lot of it is focused on the sort of the performance side of things, and there's a whole world out there, isn't there?
I think it makes the industry seem really scary as well. If you don't know anything about it, it seems like this impossible to tackle, terrifying beast. And I think what everyone who goes through school want to be in the music industry is faced with, not knowing what the industry is.
Yeah, definitely. Louise, like, how have you experienced it?
Similar to George, really. I mean, I remember Status Quo came and played at my primary school. And I remember that was as close as we got to any kind of visits or anything like that from artists or kind of music industry experts or anything like that. I probably didn't get any kind of careers advice whatsoever, and at all, and like during my time in education through school or university or anything like that. If anything, I think in the school that I went to, I won't name it, but I feel like the kind of arts and music sort of subjects just weren't encouraged at all, and they were sort of seen as something that you could pursue as a hobby, and that it wasn't something kind of tangible that you could, make a career from, especially not in the Northeast. And I imagine the same, was probably the case for Yorkshire as well. And I don't actually, in hindsight, I sort of don't blame the teachers for that, because if you're trying to give careers advice to young people, you've then got to have your foot in the door of so many different industries. And unless you've got a music teacher that's really, really engaged with the wider music industry in the area that you live in, chances are they're not going to be in a position themselves to know what those opportunities are. So it was only really once I kind of left education that I realised, and by this point I was 21, and actually working in music education, that I realised that music education existed. So it's only really been sort of through work that I kind of accidentally stumbled upon a career in music education, but it was all a little bit too little too late.
Yeah, that sort of stumbling upon the career thing is definitely something I can relate to. Leonie, is this the same for you?
Yeah, so I'm from the Netherlands, so I've got a slightly different country perspective, actually. I'm from the Netherlands. I went to school in Belgium and the Netherlands. So I did primary school Netherlands, high school Belgium, uni Netherlands. And I was lucky enough that my parents kind of indulged me in all the thousands of instruments that I wanted to learn how to play when because I can't remember how many I tried and didn't pursue, but I had zero music education in school. I think we had 2 years of a bit of drawing and a bit of singing a song together, but that was it. I didn't learn anything in school, or there wasn't really spoken about music education in schools at all. It was in a way seen as something you could pursue as further education, but it was never spoken about as a real option. Same as Louise, it was just seen as a hobby, something you do on the side whilst you work on your career. So I studied law, which made me chuckle when Bailey started talking about lawyers and solicitors at the job fairs, because it is true. When you go to job fairs or even university fairs, there's barely any focus on music education and any realism about what you can really do with it. I feel like, especially in schools, music is taken seriously when you get famous or when you go do Idols or X Factor and are successful and win, then it matters. But anything outside of that is never taken seriously and is kind of seen as, oh yeah, she's just enjoying it, isn't she? So that was, like, even in a different country, it's still the same.
That's interesting that it's not just focused on here, but yeah, it's the same other places. And same, Shanti, same question. What was your experience of that?
I think it's pretty similar to everyone else's. I think because the success rate of making it really big time is so low, it's not seen as like a viable career to pursue, because everyone only looks at like the top end, and then they just don't teach you the business side.
And there's so much of that business side, isn't there? There's so many other layers of it.
When you're looking in just beginning, it seems like hopeless to begin. Like, where do I even start?
Yeah, but that's why it's good there's like organizations like this, I guess, and like Launchpad and like Youth Music. Yeah. Well, I think that kind of leads on quite well into the next question, because you know, a couple of you were saying about like how you've trained in other things. So Leonie, you said that you were training in law, and Bailey, you studied other things, and you know, everyone's in different parts of the industry, and so the next thing that I really wanted to talk about is that that sort of like multiple skills element, because in the report it said that future creative industry workers will need to be equipped with a fusion of creative, design, tech, entrepreneurial skills alongside transferable skills for life. And so like my next question is like, what is your experience with managing these multiple skills, multiple income streams? Do you think having a portfolio career, having multiple income streams is necessary? And do you have any advice for people if they want to get into having that kind of career? To start with, I don't know. I don't like having to pick someone new every time. Louise, go on. You want to go first?
I mean, it's funny because this kind of idea of like a DIY generation came out in the report quite a lot, and we're hearing a lot that young people were just having to figure everything out for themselves. You know, there was an example. We did a Q&A, and one of the artists in the Q&A was a singer, and she was sort of talking about having to learn Photoshop and like styling and try, you know, to do everything herself basically. And that skills acquisition isn't a bad thing, but it's a time luxury. And if you're having to work a bar job and you're writing music and you're trying to rehearse and maybe you're studying, or maybe you've got care roles to think about as well, the first thing that's probably going to go is the artistic stuff and the skills development stuff. So it's something that we heard kind of a lot coming through the report. In terms of like my own experience, I mean, I'm not an artist. I used to play a lot of instruments when I was younger, but I'm not an artist now. And it's something that doesn't seem to have got much better in terms of young people understanding what the options are, what options are available to them. So, you know, I live in London now and work for Youth Music, but before that I worked on a project up in Newcastle, and it was really interesting because we'd hear from like local music and creative industries, there's a massive skills gap, like there's no young people here to take these jobs. And what I was hearing from young people was, you know, there's no opportunities for us. And there was just this massive disconnect between the two. This isn't really answering your question, I'm kind of aware of this, but one of the things that we did quite a lot of is we'd go into schools and sort of say, you know, to like a year 9 music class, you know, what do you want to be when you're older? And none of them said they wanted to be a musician, and none of them said that they wanted to have a job in the music industry. And this is one class of like 30 kids in one school, so I'm aware this isn't like gospel. And I was like, but you're all studying music, you all love music, why don't any of you want to do this for a living? And they were like, well, because we can't. And that was just a massive kind of alarm bell for me for how kind of removed the industry is from young people. And the idea of making a living just isn't feasible. So we talked a lot about, like, bear in mind, like year 9, you're young in year 9, so you don't know what's available. But we talked about all the different music venues that there were in the Northeast, all the different recording studios, and looked at how many different roles would be needed to make a gig happen, to make a tour happen. And suddenly they were like, oh, I could be a tour manager is a thing. Oh, I could do that in the Northeast. Oh, I could manage a band. Oh, I could work in A&R. I could run a venue. So, like I say, this is a slight deviation because I don't have that experience of being an artist and trying to balance a career. But suddenly this idea that they could still pursue music and make a living from it, as well as maybe still studying, suddenly, and do it in their hometown, became a bit of reality. And I think there's a lot of that missing.
Yeah, definitely. I think that like I didn't realize that how many different jobs there were in the I always knew I wanted to work in the music industry. But I thought that there was just sort of the performance and then backstage. But then when you learn about, like PR and you learn about you know, radio and everything, suddenly there's an actual way of earning money from it. So should we go to George next? I'll give you a reminder of the question if you want, or can't remember.
Yeah, go for it. I mean, it was to do with whether developing a portfolio is necessary.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I would mostly, especially regarding the things you touched on last about the breadth of opportunity in the music industry. I think my experience when I was a lot younger and I got my first job, which was working for a small record label and a radio station. The thing that my mentor encouraged me to do was to do exactly that and to develop a portfolio, as many strings to my bow as possible. And I remember thinking, I only want to be an artist, or I only want to do A&R. So I turned on opportunities to learn like radio skills and stuff. And it's only as I've gotten older, I've realized that it's so important to get as many of these skills as possible, because in the situation we have at the minute with the bottlenecking of number of jobs compared to the people who want jobs, really the more bows you have to your strings you have to your bow, the better, because there's so many opportunities that it's obviously so difficult to get a job in the industry at the minute, and you're just kind of shooting yourself in the foot if you don't develop a portfolio in that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And like same to Bailey, because you do quite a few different things. Like do you feel like having multiple skills is important for this kind of career?
Yeah, I don't know. I think I kind of do it that way because I like it, and I don't, kind of touching on what Louise was saying, I don't particularly want to like valorize like a DIY culture. Like, I think it should be something that's optional rather than people forced to do it because like they don't have the luxury, and they're like, they're learning Adobe at like 1 a.m. having worked that bar shift and that gig, and do you know what I mean? So yeah, but yeah, that said, yeah, I kind of do quite a lot of different things, like jack of all trades, master of none. And yeah, I don't know. It's been interesting the last few months because like the radio is still fairly like nascent, like a year and a half, 2 years old, and trying to work out like income streams. And like I probably wouldn't have put such an emphasis on like live streaming, tech support, but then actually we had a few cameras, come March, and then if you have a few cameras in March, then like people start hitting you up for live streaming jobs, and yeah, now it's kind of like a main source of income for the radio as well. So yeah, I guess just flexibility. But
no, I think it's interesting that you said that about it not being like the only way to do things, like, because it's not for everyone, is it, to sort of live like that, but it's definitely useful if that's what you enjoy, to have different income streams and different things like that. Same to you, Leonie. How have you experienced it? Are you multi-skilled? I'm sure you are, but
I guess yes. Yeah, kind of to repeat what Bailey has said as well. Like, I enjoy doing many different things. Sometimes I shoot myself in the foot with it because I take on too many things that are exciting. But I think over the years I've realized that one of my worst nightmares would be to be in a 9-to-5. And there's nothing wrong with a 9-to-5 if it's a nice one, but I like to diversify my income streams, because I like to work on music one day, I work on teaching the other day, work on project management another day, because it keeps things fresh, but also it keeps things exciting, I guess. Not to discount the fact that I do think it's necessary if you are in the music industry, because unless you get to a certain point in your career, I guess, where you are quote unquote famous, it's really hard to make money with one thing, especially if you're a performing artist, performing original music. I think it's different for function bands, it's different for wedding bands. But if you perform your own original music and you have to sell tickets for everything, it's really hard to get to that point where you actually make a sustainable income. Like, I know bands who, on the face of it, sell out massive venues, but will still have a side job when they're not touring, because when you're not touring, your income dries up if you are the touring artist. So I think there's a lot of value in a portfolio career, and I've kind of been thinking about this a lot over the past few years when I actually quit my full-time job and to pursue music and to really figure out how it works. Still haven't figured it out, but I think I've realized that there seems to be this really big misunderstanding of the music industry being so much more difficult to succeed in than other industries. I think people still have this mindset of you do your school, you go to uni, you find a job. And especially our generation is getting very aware of the fact that that's not really the case. Like, you don't necessarily get a job because there's not as many jobs out there as there are people, I guess. And then there's the skills gap and all that kind of stuff that really can withhold you from getting an easy job. So looking at a music career from a point of view of, oh, you want a stable income, I think that is a very difficult thing to achieve with one thing, but I don't think it's that much harder than other industries, depending on what you're looking for, if that makes sense. So doing different things and building your portfolio, building your CV will help you achieve the income that you need, but also will help you kind of figure out what it is that you actually want to do. Because I'm turning 28 this weekend and I still don't know what I want to do for the rest of my life. I didn't know this when I was 17 and went to uni. I'm 28 now. No, so giving yourself all the opportunity where you can and where you have that space. I know that not everyone can do it, but if you can, grasp it with both hands and build your portfolio, build your skills, build your knowledge, meet people, get to know people. Because I think that networking is incredibly important for that as well. I've had opportunities come up because I talk to people and I'm nice, I think. But, so that's definitely something that you should pursue, especially at the start of your career, because it's hard, to enter the music industry thinking, yes, I'm here, I've got a sound, because most of us have and I won't go on for too long, but I was talking, I had a sort of business mentoring session, and the guy I had it with just said something that stuck with me, and I've been really focusing on this year, to find side jobs or freelance jobs that help your career. I see a lot of musicians who pursue their career who feel stuck in a bar job, who think this is what I should be doing because the grind and stuff like that. But it doesn't have to be like that. I think setting your boundaries of how much sleep you need, how much money you need, and really realistically looking at what you need and how you can achieve that will really help you focus on your career. And that can mean that you don't have to work a bar job that you hate for 10 years. If you love the bar job, do the bar job. But if you hate it, there are possibilities out there that you can explore.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice for people that are looking into doing that portfolio career, because there are lots of different ways of earning money on the side that could also upskill you in ways that you don't even realize will benefit you in your career that you want to do. So finally, Shante, as a musician, have you felt that you've had to upskill in other areas apart from performance?
I think I'm first and foremost a singer, and that's always been my passion. But in today's climate, it's a lot easier if you diversify and are adaptable, but also recognizing that this is a career that's hard enough if you love it. So don't do things that you hate just because you feel like it's necessary. Like, prioritize your own mental health and like making sure you're doing it because you still love it. So don't take the passion out of it by doing the things in like, for me, I'm not the best at like social media, which is definitely necessary for like advertising your music, but over this lockdown period I've learned that like taking the priority off of that and taking the creativity back makes the whole thing a lot easier. So just like prioritizing, making sure you're still passionate about what you're doing.
Yeah,
otherwise,
absolutely.
What's the point?
Absolutely, because it's like you were saying, Louise, like it is hard if you're doing a lot of different things. You've got a lot of different responsibilities, and then your passion unfortunately ends up getting put to sort of the back of the queue, doesn't it? Sometimes, which is a shame. But that actually leads on to what I wanted to talk about is, you were saying that, Louise, that certain people have different, situations. They might have care responsibilities and things like that. They've got people that they need to earn money for, and it's not always easy. And that's something that was covered in the report. A particular point that I wanted to look at was a quote that said, "Social class was found above all else to influence young people's chances of earning money through music. Those from lower income backgrounds were significantly less likely to be earning money through music than those from higher income backgrounds," which I think is really important. And there's a lot that we could cover on this topic, but something I think that specifically is interesting is that the sort of barrier, the networking barrier, is experienced more acutely by those from lower income backgrounds. So yeah, I wanted to sort of ask everyone really how they've experienced accessing networking opportunities and how networking has affected you with your career. Obviously, if it's different, if you're not a musician, or you can sort of adjust it to your situation or what you've experienced. But yeah, Bailey, if you want to go first on that, if that's all right.
Hi. Networking. Yeah, I think it's necessary. I mean, it was an interesting conversation. I have a mentor had a mentor called Kazim, and we were chatting about it. And I think, yeah, it's slightly different in regional ways. And we were talking about like partnerships, especially for like organizations or collectives like radio stations and stuff like that. And he was like, yeah, I was speaking to him about, how partnerships come about for him. And he's like, oh yeah, just kind of meet these people out and about. And I was trying to explain to him like that doesn't really happen in Leeds in the same way. But yeah, I don't know how much more I have to say on it. Like, I don't know, it makes me extremely anxious, the idea of networking, but
yeah, it's definitely,
it's necessary. And also, I guess there's other different ways of doing it. Like, it doesn't have to be in like that kind of popular imaginary way of like chatting to someone and giving them like a business card at drinks. Like, people just hit people up on social media a lot nowadays. So.
Yeah, definitely. I think that with the social media, maybe that's a reason why it might be the way that people can access networking opportunities that otherwise wouldn't get it from, maybe their parents or friends of friends and that kind of thing. Louise, do you want to say something on that?
Yeah. I think it's funny, isn't it? I think when you leave education in particular, it's about a change of mindset, because you kind of go through school or college or university thinking that we live in a meritocracy, and we don't, unfortunately. And we're sort of sold this idea, if you work hard, good things will come. And that's true to some extent. But we see it in every kind of sort of facet of society that actually, I'm trying to be really careful with my words, but basically, if you come from a kind of wealthier background and your family are well networked and that kind of thing, it's easier to rise to the top than if you don't have those luxuries. And in some senses, I think it's easier in small cities. I know sort of Bailey said it, maybe certain opportunities don't exist in Leeds, but George and I both kind of said before we went live, like, George and I know each other. I know his mum because I've worked with his mum. Like, I know George because of his music. Like, Newcastle's quite a small city, and it's a little fishbowl, and therefore most people working within a music or art scene, you know, they're only kind of, you know, 2 degrees away from somebody. So I think if you are living in a smaller city and thinking, you know, oh, everything's in London or everything's in the south, or, you know, you're outside of like Manchester or Leeds and think, oh, everything's happening in the city, you know, look at it as a kind of little mini ecosystem and how you can kind of build your relationships within that smaller space. And from there, you can kind of venture out and out and out and out and out and build a slightly bigger kind of network. I agree that the kind of formal sense of networking is awful. It's excruciating. Like, I hated it, you know, for work. If I was doing a specific networking event or like a business breakfast or something, they're horrible. Like, nobody wants to dish out a business card and walk up to somebody and kind of give a sales pitch. But the internet makes that a lot easier, and events like this and the kind of things that, you know, Music Leeds and Yorkshire Music Forum and Come Play With Me run, you know, take advantage of that. But yeah, it's not an easy process. But I think when people within the music industry, in some senses, it's easier because it's a shared passion. People work in this industry because they love it and because they care about it. So it's far easier to strike up a conversation that you can be engaged about and excited about when it comes to music than you would be if you were talking about like property or whatever. Like, if that floats your boat, then great. But, you know, you're building on a passion. So in that sense, it should be easier. But yeah, going back to kind of the report, and networking and the information that's available to people, and we're probably going to touch a little bit more on kind of class and income, but, you know, ironically, those from lower income backgrounds were more than twice as likely to be unaware of the funding opportunities available to support them. You know, young people from lower income backgrounds were less likely to be able to, I think nearly half is less likely, found it harder
I get it.
to access networking opportunities. So it's a problem. It's a sort of systemic problem, and something that needs to be broken down. And I think, like I say, organisations like Music Leeds and like Yorkshire Music Forum are kind of making it more accessible and making it easier.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely think that I think social class is definitely something that affects people's ability to know about the networking opportunities that are out there. I mean, when I say networking, I do kind of mean the informal version, because me myself, I'm the same. I can't do the formal one. I'm very incapable of that kind of thing. But yeah, like, I think there's definitely a disparity there. But like you said, you know, Yorkshire Music Forum and Come Play With Me and Music Leeds and Launchpad and, you know, Youth Music, they all provide opportunities for people. And it's just, maybe it's about getting the knowledge of these organisations out there to people who aren't already in that bubble, because it can be like a sort of a bubble, you know. It can be quite what's the word? I've lost the word, but yeah, a bubble, I think.
Can't it? Yeah. The only other thing I mentioned, sorry, because I'm conscious I've been talking for quite a while, but is like, Bailey, you mentioned mentors, and I don't know how you found yours or how you kind of came in contact with yours, but I think if you see somebody that works in the line of work that you're interested in, or someone doing something that you're interested in, approach them, because people, generally speaking, like to, you know, if people think that other people think they're an authority on something, it's quite flattering. Don't be afraid to approach somebody and say, look, like, I really like what you're doing, or I'm really interested in what you're doing. You know, is there any kind of advice or guidance that you can offer me? And generally, I think people will oblige.
Yeah, definitely. I'm just conscious of time, so I was thinking of maybe just carrying on with that mentors thing, because there's actually a question that I want to talk about, a sort of a topic I want to talk about sort of, I think when it comes to approaching mentors, sometimes it can be a bit intimidating, especially if you don't feel represented. So, you know, from my personal experience, I've often, you know, been in situations where I've been in like surrounded by sort of like music industry people, and it's often, you know, just men in the room or something like that, and which is fine, but you know, sometimes you don't feel necessarily that you've got that connection where you can just be like, hey, you know, we're from the same place or we're from the same environment, can we chat? And so first of all, like, I wanted to ask everyone, you know, have you yourselves ever approached a mentor or worked with a mentor? Have you got someone that advised you, and how did that help? And then I guess I'll ask the next question after, but it's sort of relating to what I just said. But yeah, Shante, have you, is there a mentor that you've worked with who's helped you in that sense?
Well, I've worked with quite a few people who've like given me guidance and advice to get to where I am now, because going back to the school thing, I didn't have a clue going in about funding or the opportunities, and I think it's finding people who are willing to teach you rather than do things for you, because it's best if you take control of your own career so you can take control of your own direction. And the saying about teach a man to fish and he'll eat forever.
Yeah, it's true.
I think, yeah.
No, definitely. It sounds like it's helped you out, definitely. And George, have you worked with has there been a mentor that's worked with you before? Oh, you're just on mute.
Oh, sorry.
Right.
No, I've never specifically had to go and seek out a mentor, but I think the same sort of thing applies when in terms of networking, because if you're wanting to find a mentor, and a lot of the time that's necessary to develop within the industry, it's impossible to do that if within your circles there's nobody who has any sort of particular connection. And it basically echoing what Luz was saying before, but I think the issue extends particularly in the sort of rural towns, not near cities. People who are passionate about music in the industry who have no access to mentors. I think that's a big problem, and it's just like a systemic problem, you know.
And so, like, as I was saying before, about the whole mentor thing and having people to look up to in the industry, I wanted to ask if how well the specific quote that was in the report was that oh, where is it? Lost it now. Okay, I've lost the quote, but it was talking about how people have struggled to find themselves represented in the industry, and that's why they've found blocks towards sort of reaching out to people for advice. And so I wanted to put that out there to everyone, how they feel represented, if at all, in the industry or the part of the music industry that they work in. Leonie, should we go to you first?
Yeah, I always find this question quite difficult to answer or to deal with, because obviously I know I'm a woman, and that means I'm underrepresented in the music industry if you look at the statistics. But at the same time, I'm a white middle class woman, so a lot of the barriers that do exist didn't necessarily exist for me. And I think my barriers weren't necessarily that I felt like I didn't have access to the industry. I think it was more knowledge, different priorities when I was younger, family not believing in me, but more having their own background in not always having the financial security that they needed, and pushing me towards financial security rather than creativity and what I think maybe would have given me a happier life. So yeah, I never feel treated differently because I'm a woman in the industry. But I guess that might also just have to do with the fact that I went into the industry when I was a bit older. I've always been on stage, but I only started doing gigs independently and kind of fending for myself 4 years ago when I was 23, 24. So you come from a whole different perspective, because you've kind of already formed a lot of your personality and formed a lot of your confidence. And so you're not really taken aback by many things men say, I guess.
Yeah.
And especially doing it in Sheffield, like Sheffield is on the one hand a super, super warm and welcoming environment, and they really took me in straight away, and we've got loads of open mic nights here, and I never felt like I was not taken seriously. On the other hand, there's a proper lad culture in music. We all know this. So you do kind of find yourself sometimes being the token woman on the lineup, and that kind of stuff. And I've always felt really uncomfortable with that position, because I want to play gigs, I want to headline gigs because I'm good, not because I'm a woman. And it's a really difficult balance to strike, because I really understand that people in the industry want to do good, but there's different ways to do that, I guess. It's not just by doing, oh, look at these amazing women in the Sheffield music industry. It's by saying, look at these amazing artists. They happen to be. So I've never really felt the kind of barriers that statistics show, but I'm aware of people who have.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that point about the because it's tricky. You don't want to be chosen to do something based on your gender or based on, you know, how you fit into a certain social group. But in the same time, in the same breath, you know, it's being done for a relatively positive reason. Same question, Bailey. Do you feel like you're represented in your industry, and how important do you think representation is for young creatives?
I feel like I'm never ready for your questions. I feel like I always think you're going to ask someone else.
I like to throw them at you spontaneously and just catch you off guard.
Yeah. What do I think about representation in the industry? Okay, so yeah, I mean, I have a sticky relationship with representation. I mean, me and Aura kind of were like, wanted to start the radio station coming out of like education, because there wasn't that much in the city, but like the one kind of online radio there was like super kind of like white boys playing electronic music, and there wasn't really much space for anything else within that. So yeah, I guess one of the aims of starting the radio was to try and like draw together some of the more diverse and marginalized communities within the city. That being said, maybe that was like a year and a half, 2 years ago. Now I'm like less eager to like hang my hat on representation. I don't know if it's always the answer. I mean, yeah, it can depend, like representation, but doing what? Representation, but in what role? Like, and I think oftentimes, I don't know, I'm thinking about like big music and arts institutions in the city that like may be like seen to be like, I don't know, diverse, working with like a range of different marginalized communities. But then if you looked at like their budget and the budget breakdown of like what's going towards that compared to like what's going towards everything else, yeah, it would kind of be pale in comparison. And lastly, it's kind of perpetuated by like the funding like streams within this country. And like you're looking at stuff like Arts Council, and you look at the list of like MPOs, which are like the people that get like money from Arts Council regularly. And if you look at like Yorkshire, and I mean, I think it's like 10 million a year to Opera North, and then like the other like 20 music organizations in the region barely make up like $1 million a year. And it's the same with the kind of Cultural Recovery Fund. And I feel like oftentimes they just kind of like perpetuate white supremacy by like giving the money to organizations that already, already are failing to like engage with marginalized communities.
Yeah. So in terms of like where that funding should go, what do you think would be a better way to invest in that? Because obviously you started with already, the Sable, and it's a community organization. It's DIY. It's grassroots in it. And one of the parts that was in the report was saying that the next sort of generation. Well, I've got the actual quote here, actually. Let's go for that instead. So it said, impatient for change, this new wave has started cultivating their own grassroots movements. Increasingly, we're seeing a generation take it upon themselves to be the change they advocate. As the writer Renee, I can't say that name, so I'm not going to say it because I don't want to offend anyone, has pointed out, these kind of collectives are creating their own rules and leading by example, using their collective power to force changes to venues, culture, festivals, and legislation, rather than waiting for top-down action to happen. So this question is, you know, to those like Bailey, you know, who run a collective, have you managed to receive support or communication from businesses at the top? And if not, what kind of support would you like to see? So I guess, I mean, I don't know if any of the rest of you are involved in the same kind of organisation, so I'm going to put the question to Bailey just because we're running out of time. But yeah, if that's okay.
Yeah. Like not enough, basically. There's not really enough support. I don't know if there's enough will for it. Obviously, I say that, and we've just received money from a project from Youth Music, which is great. And similarly, like we're part of Launchpad.
It looks so exciting, that one, by the way. Is that the radio sort of like apprenticeship scheme thing? Yeah, it looks great. Yeah. Sorry, carry on.
And yeah, I don't know, but even then, and I don't want to like trivialize them, but like these are quite like piecemeal amounts of money or like projects in compared to like, you know, the grand scheme of things. And you know, I could name off the like arts organizations in Yorkshire that got like 700-800 grand from like a cultural recovery fund. So yeah, I don't know, it's a challenge. Yeah, I don't know if I have the answers on that one.
That's all right, no worries. I think it's definitely probably something that needs to be built on, definitely distributing money towards different organizations that can help. And
but just kind of to add on it, yeah, so with like all of these kind of like government funds and stuff, like the argument is always that there aren't enough of organizations that are like eligible or in a position to apply to these things, for example, cultural recovery, or like don't fit MPO status. But you've also kind of got to look at that and say, okay, well, why is there no like, I don't know, Black-led or like women-led organizations doing this? And I think there should be more emphasis to like kind of redress those kind of things rather than just like the symptoms, because I think oftentimes then it just goes to like predominantly white-led, predominantly male-led organizations that have the kind of diversity as an add-on. Yeah, and usually No,
that makes absolute sense. I'm just conscious of time, so I just want to, before we go to sort of like questions from everyone who's, I don't know if there's been any comments, but if we go to before we go to questions, I just wanted to ask if everyone could sort of give me like their sort of vision of what they'd like to see the music industries be like for emerging creatives, like what they would, if there's like one thing that they'd like to see more funding for, or they'd like to see created in schools or that kind of thing, and if there's also any advice you can give to young creatives as well. So if we start with Louise, that's all right.
Oh, big question.
I know.
Two things to speak to Bailey's point, and I think it's worth me sort of touching on as a funder, is this idea of collective responsibility. We as a funder and all funders have a responsibility to ensure that our money and public money is being fairly and proportionately distributed. And a big part of that comes through consultation, it comes through speaking to people, it comes through identifying actually what are the, you know, where are the gaps, where are the priorities in different regions, because what we need in London is going to be different to the West Mids, is going to be different compared to Yorkshire, and the makeup of people is going to be different in all of those places. And a big part of this, you know, the blueprint report, you know, we consulted with 1,300 young people, we consulted with 100 or so organisations to find out exactly what it was that they felt like they wanted and they needed. And our response to that was was this Incubator Fund, which is, you know, the fund that Bailey mentioned, and I think he's right. Like, it's not huge, life-changing amounts of money at all. But what it is that it's putting money back into the hands of young people. And so talking about kind of what I want to see for the future, for Yorkshire, for the North East, obviously, in terms of where I come from, is to see more tangible, sustainable career opportunities for young musicians, and all the stuff that we've talked about in terms of the barriers that young people face. It's frustrating, really, but I think money is probably one of the biggest things that's going to help to break down those barriers and to allow young people the opportunity to develop and learn, so that at some point down the line, they're the people in these organisations delivering projects or making decisions about where money goes. Yeah, I could write a thesis on this, to be honest, but I think it's a case of people who can putting their money where their mouth is, and, you know, youth music and other funders are a part of that, but ensuring that money is going, you know, to the people that it should be, and ultimately benefiting young people to make a career out of music.
Yeah, definitely, I agree. George, any thoughts on that one?
For me, it's 2 or 3 things. I think one of the main things for me is access. I think one of the massive things that we've learned, especially over the pandemic, is that a lot of jobs that are advertised for only people who live in London can be done remotely. So allowing people all up and down the country to get these jobs and have the access that they wouldn't normally have is a huge thing. I think curriculum change, learning about the breadth of opportunities is a massive thing, because for me, and I think everyone here, it wasn't touched on in school at all. And then finally, it's a bit of a trickier one. I think it's important to change the perspective that I think Leonie touched on before, that being an artist is considered more of a hobby and not something that's important or a credible life plan. I think if we can change that perception, then I think that's a really important thing, but that's obviously a more challenging one.
Yeah, I definitely we'll get there eventually, but yeah, it's one. Shante, what are you thinking?
I think, like George, I think it starts with education. I think opportunities like Launchpad and Come Play With Me and all the other music charities are so important, but in a lot of the time, people who need them the most are never told about them, and so you don't, like, I didn't find these opportunities till this age, and I think if I'd have known about the support that I could have been offered from when I left school, like primary education, then your development will be so much easier, and it saves you from being in like some sketchy situations, like you was on about representation. Sometimes as a woman you find yourself surrounded by men who say inappropriate things and you don't feel able to speak up. So I think what I'd like to see is an industry where we all feel supported and surrounded by people where we are able to talk, so we know what's right from wrong and we all feel represented.
Yeah, definitely. Leonie, same question.
I'm going to try to not repeat everyone else, because I want loads of things that you guys had said. But yeah, I think the main thing is it should start young. Primary schools and high schools, and just the educational system should reinstate the value of music and creative education, and to start taking the role of creativity seriously for not just music but everything. We spend loads of time learning facts and figures and can't actually understand them because we're never taught to use that side of our thinking. And learning music and learning creativity and taking it seriously and adding it into our curriculum as a whole, I think will really help not just make people take the music industry more seriously and the creative industries, but also just create a different kind of workforce where everyone has loads of transferable soft skills and skills that they wouldn't normally have because you're not taught to think in a creative way.
Yeah, definitely. Education it's come up a few times, hasn't it? I think it's definitely going to be a big factor in the change. And Bailey, finally, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, kind of agree with what everyone else has said thus far. Education important, but then I also think it needs to happen really in tandem, as kind of Louise was saying, in tandem with there being like viable careers and money and paid opportunities to do stuff. So like I know it's kind of across the arts, but like definitely in like online radio sphere, like it relies so heavily on like volunteer labor, and it's kind of again like valorized, and actually it just is a bigger barrier for people from low income backgrounds that, you know, can't afford to just do 6 months like unpaid internship or go and, you know, after school can just spend a year just going around getting that experience. So yeah, I don't know, education is great, but I just don't want a bunch of kids coming into an industry that's got no money for them.
Absolutely. Yeah. I definitely agree, and I mean we could talk for ages on this, but we're running out of time. But I think definitely the importance of paying people for their work is huge, and I think I'd definitely personally like to see, as well as people learning more about the opportunities that are available throughout the country, not just in London. Personally, I'd love to also see people being offered more paid work placements, because I think that's definitely, it's career boosting. It's, you know, it means more people can get involved, and obviously everyone needs money. And it makes you feel good. It makes you feel like you're actually a professional. So we have I think 4 minutes left. So we've got one question. And that is, are you able to suggest any specific resources to look at for young people who want to work in the music industry? So we've only got a couple of minutes left, so I'm going to put this to Louise, because I feel like you probably can throw a load of resources at us. So where would you suggest?
Well, luckily they're all in one place in terms of the things I was going to suggest. So the Youth Music website is essentially now a hub of kind of information and content for young people looking to begin a career in the music industries. Lily obviously has contributed, and we've got a pool of what we call our next gen, so our 18 to 25-year-olds who share information, tips, advice. We've got Q&As on there. Lily's done a brilliant one with Tom McFarlane from Jungle. We have artists and sort of industry boards giving their advice as well. The other thing I would sort of be really mindful of is to look at the opportunities that are available in your area. So there's a map on the Youth Music website of youth music funded projects. If we're talking specifically kind of Yorkshire based, you're probably in the right place in terms of access to Yorkshire Music Forum, you know, to Music Leads, to Come Play With Me, to Higher Rhythm, to Kicker, the full works. There's so many different projects there who are offering, you know, advice and support, and a network of people who can help. Yeah, Youth Music website, Youth Music Network, and I guess the what are they called? The logos across the bottom of the page are probably all good websites to go to as well.
Yeah, definitely. I'm just having a look now at them, and I've worked with Music Leads, and they're amazing. Come Play With Me are amazing. Youth Music, obviously, sick. You know, everyone. There's so many opportunities, and I think even after just speaking to everyone today, it's looking like we've got some good people going into the industry going forward. So fingers crossed, things are going to be where we want them to be. So before we go, I want to thank all of the funders for funding this panel. That I think I mentioned them before, but we've got BPI, Youth Music, of course. We've got PRS Foundation and National Lottery, Arts Council England, Leeds 2023, Arts Leeds City Council through Launchpad. So yeah, make sure that if you are available over the next couple of days, that you tune into the rest of the chats that are happening, because they're really useful. Hopefully this one's been useful. It's been really interesting for me. It's really nice to speak to you guys. And it sounds like you're all doing really interesting things. And thanks, Louise, for hopping on this with us and giving us lots of information about what you can do with youth music. Definitely recommend anyone who is wanting to get into music gets involved with them, because done really good things for me, and I'm sure for you guys. So yeah, watch the rest of the events, and big thanks to to Yorkshire Music Forum and Launchpad for putting this together. And I think that is us done. So thanks, and yeah, lovely to see you guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
See you.